Hello, I'm Valérie Wartelle, and Closer Still is my exhibition. The felting process is a very organic process, which is what really interests me. As you progress with it, things happen all the time. So you're constantly having to question, is it right, is it wrong, do I want it, don't I want it, do I carry on with this? So, and I like this question and answer throughout the process. So what I do is I tend to slow it right down. So I use very tepid water. So basically you're using water to make the fiber more floppy, and as you and with a bit of soap, and as you roll it, it interlocks the fibers together, and this is what makes it a sturdy fabric canvas you can frame. But so I work flat. So I often have to just hang the piece in the studio to try to see whether the perspective and the composition is still okay. And then I'll come back and I'll do another layer. And I put the soap and water and I roll, I unroll, I squeeze, I hang it up again. So this is kind of the process. But every time something happens and it shrinks a little bit and a little bit more. So you have to, within a certain window, manage to finish your composition. So you've got the kind of shrinkage element to consider, so you don't lose the kind of light that you're trying to create and the element and the textures. You also have a time issue because arrives a point where you can't actually felt anymore, where it's actually too dense. And you're also working wet, so you're having to work with wet colors, which means that they will be different once they're dry. So you're constantly anticipating what's going to happen. So you're having to be kind of a step ahead of what the material is going to be doing, what the process is going to impart. And I think this is what I find really quite challenging but exciting at the same time. Really, materials are actually the center, the core of the felting process. And the idea is to exploit the materials as much as you can with their characteristics and make them shine and breathe through the process. So materials are totally essential. I work with wool and I've added things like silk and linen in them. Really, that's because if you think about the wool fiber, I tend to work with merino wool and they're wool tops, so the fibers are all kind of slightly the same length and the same count, the same thickness. So it's like if you had, I've got loads of colors, but it's like if you had the same brush with lots of different colors. So when I add the linen and the silk, it gives me different tools to work with. So I might be, instead of working with paint, then I can add charcoal or that kind of thing. So I do that with fibers. So effectively I'm kind of painting with the fibers. I use only natural materials, but that's really just a personal preference. I think it's because I'm used to them, I know them. Over the years I've developed a certain knowledge about those fibers and those materials. So I don't really have to think about them quite in the same way. I can use them and I know what to expect from them. But yes, essentially, you're using the process to kind of expose the fibers and show the nature of the fibers and the properties of the fibers, which is what is exciting, I find. So it's color, texture. I've realized over the years I've actually narrowed the range of materials that I use, and I think this is so I can really have a in-depth kind of vocabulary about those materials. So quite a narrow range of material, lots of colors, and just about knowing how they behave in different contexts. Well, it's really lovely to see it all hung up like this. It's wonderful. The way I worked with this collection, I kind of, over the years I've developed this way of working where I start with a small drawing, and the drawing is very free. I don't have an end point. I don't really know what I'm going to end up with. I'm just really enjoying playing with marks, working the marks. So I know it's kind of going to be a landscape and inspired by the elements, the weather, the seasons. But I don't really know anything apart from I start with the colors, I start with a mark, and the mark leads me to another mark, and then I add some kind of collage, and then I might kind of put some ink, and the drawing evolves like this. But because I'm quite free, it doesn't matter if it works or it doesn't work. So, but it has energy, it has kind of movement, and then I can, what I do then is I like to use little viewfinders, and I kind of reconfigure the compositions, or I might use the whole drawing as my inspiration. And then I like to translate that into felting. So I don't do very big drawings, because the bigger drawings, the more information I would have to actually translate. And I really want to leave room for the process to really act on its own. So small drawings, I use those and I translate them onto the table, onto the cloth, and then I start applying the fibres. So what I wanted to do was really kind of look into the mark and see if I could actually use those marks and translate them into a different medium, into a different scale, and see what happens really. So with this collection I kind of worked around the mini-series, which is keeping them small and with kind of constraints of size, but also of information. And then I also wanted to see how I could scale them up. But it's always really inspired by the rural environment, and they always have a kind of semi-abstract feel to them. So with the process, it's very accessible. You're working with water, soap, and I use just kind of rolling foam tubing. It's so anybody can actually do it at home. Very accessible process. But what's important is knowing how quickly or how hard or how slow you want to actually do it. So in order to slow it down, I kind of use very tepid water, and to start with I don't want to put too much strength on the rolling. I just really want the layers to define themselves without really felting. I want to keep my window as open as possible so I can keep on working on it. When you roll, towards the end you have to bring the temperature of the water quite high, and then you roll. You kind of roll a lot, which is when it can be a bit tedious, but at this point you have to kind of go with the rhythm. You have to kind of think about the pressure you apply. And I often think my right side is stronger than my left, so I will turn the kind of package over, and I try to think about it so it's as even as possible, as balanced as possible. So you kind of go into this slight kind of trance moment where sometimes I count in my head, in French usually, and sometimes it's just how your body reacts. So as it gets too dense, you start to get a bit tired, so you know to stop, and then you squeeze, and then you put some more and you start again. So there is a repetition within the process, as well as a repetition of the movement within certain elements of it. And I think altogether then it's about maintaining that balance throughout a piece. So you know that in your mind you kind of you kind of nurtured it in a way, how it should be. So yeah, that's how I think of it. Yeah, so the chorus series, so that was interesting because, so as I explained, I start from drawings and from kind of small sections, and I felt that they were kind of talking to each other, like a dark and a light. There was a kind of similar elements within composition and the marks. They were done at the same time. But I felt there were so many layers. It's a bit like if you were either looking at it from above, or whether you were under the water, or whether you were kind of flying with the elements. It just really felt very immersive, and I wanted to try to explore that through the medium of felting. So the scale was important for me there to work with, and challenging because having not done it at that scale before. Sometimes I can just apply one thread on a piece of work, as here I had to do that as well as to kind of layer it more. And I really wanted the materials to have that space to be able to show the textures and the colors, and for people to feel that they could really get into those materials. And I think there's an element of looking at it from a distance, and then you get kind of pulled into the detail of the texture and the colors. And because it's layered, you can sometimes just guess the layers behind, and it just pulls you in. So that's really what I was looking to achieve on those large scale pieces. And to be honest, this is the span of my arms, so there's no way I can go bigger.